Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2024 release Speak No Evil, and yes, this is the remake of the 2022 release from Denmark of the same name. And actually, I saw this movie at Benji's Drive-In Theater, which is my local drive-in, which I love. So anytime you can see a horror movie at a theater, it's awesome. Anytime it's a drive-in theater, it's even more awesome. So just shout out to Benji's for just being great. But anyway, Speak No Evil. Directed by James Watkins, who also did Eden Lake, The Woman in Black, and a episode or two of Black Mirror. So pretty good pedigree there for a director. This was written by Watkins as well as Christian Tafdrup and Mads Tafdrup, who did the original 2022 release. And then stars James McAvoy, which I'm just going to tell you off the bat. James McAvoy is phenomenal in this film, which shouldn't really come as much of a surprise to anyone because James McAvoy has been killing it in roles forever. I mean, ever since he, showed up on the scene. So he does a particularly phenomenal job. Now, everyone does a really good job in this film, I do believe, but the fact that he is so ridiculously good and he plays a very interesting kind of wild character just it makes him stand out even more, and it actually does a little bit of a disservice to the rest of the actors, unfortunately, that you just end up focusing so much on James McAvoy and how well he's doing and how interesting of a character he is. But it brings a lot of enjoyment to the film, and he really does drive things forward. So, quick synopsis of the film. It's basically about an American couple, which it was different in the original film. An American couple who are on vacation in, I believe, Italy, and they run into a British couple who basically they become a bit friends with. They are a little bit more wild in the way they are because the American couple is like very structured about how they raise their daughter, and they're very structured about like how they do their days, how their relationship is, and things are very kind of like ho-hum mundane. And then they meet this other couple from the UK, and they're a little more loose. They're a little more wild, and they have a son, and they start getting along really well, and it becomes this thing of like, hey, they're injecting a little bit of fun into our lives. So they get invited by this couple to where they live in the UK, which is kind of like off in the, I'm not going to say in the woods, but a little more rural area. And so they end up accepting, and they go and visit them, and then it is a horror film. So things aren't quite what they seem on the surface, obviously, with this family, and things start to go downhill. It is a very gradual going downhill, which I think they do at a pretty good pace. The film is a bit over an hour and 40 minutes. I think it's like around like an hour and 50. I think it's like an hour and 48 or something, but it's a little bit on the longer end, but I don't think it feels super long because they do a really good job with the pacing, with how interesting the characters are. They do at good intervals, the little tidbits of things, getting glimpses into what's going on with this and what's wrong and what feels off. And then also, like I was saying, James McAvoy is in this a lot and just is magnetic on the screen. So those are great things. But that's all I'm going to say about the story. I do recommend it. I think it's a good film. They do a good job of establishing the characters very quickly. They don't waste a whole lot of time on trying to give you a ton of backstory into these characters through conversation and interactions. They end up giving you a really good idea very quickly of who these people are and what their relationship dynamics are. So that's just smart writing. That's great because then you can kind of just get that out of the way. You can focus on the more interesting things for the audience. Because a lot of people will say with like TV shows and movies that in the beginning, oh, it's kind of slow because they're establishing characters. That wasn't the case with this one, so that's good. The acting is very good, like I said, especially James McAvoy. There are some very beautiful landscapes in this film, which I'm always a fan of seeing in any movie, specifically horror, because I always kind of like that dichotomy between something so beautiful naturally and then something so horrible from a human standpoint. And I love how those things kind of contrast in films. So that's very much at play here. So I love that. Great shooting locations. Having seen the original, there are a lot of small things that hint at what's coming, but it's easy to not pick up on those if it's your first time viewing the film. My wife was with me at the drive-in watching this film, and she's not really into horror films, but she actually was very much riveted by this film because she viewed it a little bit more as just like a thriller. Even though there's plenty of horror to it, I could see people who are just in the thrillers being into it because my wife very much was. She ended up liking the film even more than I did, and I wonder if a large part of that was the fact that she has not seen the original film, so she didn't know what was going to happen. Now, the stuff I was just talking about, like little things in dialogue and the other little things that happen with characters that kind of hint at what's coming, I was just picking up on that stuff, obviously, because I knew where this was going. I knew what was going to happen. So it gives it some rewatch value for that reason, which I think is quite interesting. And my wife did not pick up on any of that stuff. I was talking to her about it after the film was done. So much like the original, there are things that some characters do that don't make real life sense. Now, this is one of the biggest problems with the film, in my opinion. That was a problem with the original film. Characters don't act sensibly. Now, for some of the characters, it makes sense why they don't act sensibly, but for some of the other characters, it does not. And that's one of the biggest issues that people talked about with the original film. And you still have that with this film, unfortunately. And I think they should have done a better job of kind of cleaning that up. Now, I think they did clean it up some, because I think the original film has a lot more of those instances. But this one still has a few of them. One that is extremely glaring that I think they could have pulled off in a much different way and should have pulled off in a much different way. Because it definitely is one of those moments where you're just like, nope, 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 nope. They would not do this. People would not do this. There's no freaking way. So I think that was a big issue with the film, in my opinion. The reveal of what's really going on in the film is done different than in the original film. But I think it's done quite well. In general, I think from a script standpoint, they overall improved on the original film. Although there is one thing that I'll talk about coming up that I think they did not. I think it got a little bit, I wouldn't say worse, but less awesome than the original film. The story progression is good, but could have been moved a bit quicker. There are a few scenes where they're kind of repeating stuff that they've kind of already established. Now, to a degree, it makes sense to have the repetition, but with how much they did repeat this type of stuff in certain scenes, I just don't think it was necessary, and I think they could have cut a few of those scenes out. But overall, good pacing, things move at a good progression, so I am happy with it overall. They do well with creating some tense scenes, and it's done without having a blaring score. That's another thing. They have a very well composed score, but also a pretty restrained score, which I'm a huge fan of. I do not want filmmakers screaming at me to tell me how I feel in certain instances. Now, obviously, it gets a little more heavy and louder during very intense scenes, but it's not over the top. It's not too much. It's not like someone just screaming like an inch away from your face, which is how some films feel these days. But they did a really good job with the score. Also, the score is kind of, it has these very interesting kind of almost tribal drum portions to it at times, which I really like. That just makes things feel like kind of off and weird. And again, just going back to the composition of the score, they just did such a nice job with that. Now, the ending of this film is pretty good. I did like the ending, but I greatly prefer the ending of the original film. Going into watching this remake, I called it that they were going to change the ending and how they were going to change the ending. Not the specific events of what happened, but the overall feel of what happens at the end of the film. I called it. I knew it. I was like, this is for an American audience. They're trying to get a wider release. This was done by Blumhouse. So they're going to soften things a lot. And they did soften things a lot, unfortunately, in my opinion. I think it would have been better if they would have gone more bold and done what the original film did, or something very similar to what the original film did. But still, with, softening things up a bunch, I still think that the ending they came up with was pretty good. I did enjoy it, so just saying. This film, actually, this isn't spoilery, but this film speaks to the mundanity that life can become and how something different can become enticing because of the fact that it is different. it breaks you away from the norm, the ho-hum of your everyday life. So I kind of like that aspect of it. But overall, this is a very good remake, in my opinion. And like I said, I feel like overall, it improves upon the original film, but there's that big difference with the ending. So I'm actually going to give it the exact same rating that they gave the original, which is 3.5 stars out of 5. I would recommend checking it out. Thought about going 4, but it's just not quite there. If I did quarters, it would be 3.75, but I don't, so 3.5 stars. But this is where I'd love to hear your opinions on this one. Go ahead and put them in the comments. I do have memberships for my channel right now. There's a link in the description if you want to look into those things and see what you get for a nominal fee. Subscribe to my channel. Would love if you would help me out with that. Just being a part of this community, and thumbs up on this video if you want to help me with the YouTube algorithm. And the last thing, if you want to know when I'm putting up new videos, hit the notification bell button and then you will know. But regardless, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And until next time, keep it brutal.